What you won't do, do for love. You tried everything, but you don't give up. I'm just a sucker for love. Hey, y'all, it's your girl DJ with Plan for Keeps, dating app and podcast, and I am back at y'all with another episode, another reflective question. I was listening to Tupac's version of What You Won't Do for Love, and based on the song, I would pose this question of, are you a sucker for love or are you a sucker for being chosen? And I would argue that Tupac, within his lifetime, at least in dating, relationships, and love, he was a sucker for being chosen. I would argue that all day. I don't care what nobody say. The lyrics in this song, he rapped about a girl who had jealousy issues and for a time sticking it out to prove to her that he was worthy of her not thinking these thoughts of him. And then there was another part of the song where he was rapping about being a side dude and sticking around because he felt like he should be the main dude and the girl just needed to put faith and trust in him. If that ain't toxic, I don't know what is. If that's not longing to be chosen, I don't know what is. Okay. But I was thinking on this song, one thing that came to my mind was just a reminder that men and women, we all want the same thing amongst each other. We all want to feel love. We all want to feel connection. We all want to feel safe amongst each other. And I feel like, we just live in somewhat parallel universes due to what society puts on us. And, we want the same things and we carry those out and act differently due to society and society norms and what we've been through in childhood and how it was displayed to us how to connect with others, and also just what was taught to us to go after and all of that good stuff. So I do generally believe we want the same things, but based on our upbringing, based on what was hammered into us, what was top tier, what was good, and our preferences on who we would go the extra mile for, just really shows that we want and we kind of do the same things when it comes to dating and relationships, especially if you are someone who is of insecure attachment style. So with all of that being said, thinking on the little bits and tidbits that I do know of Tupac's childhood, I know that he was raised parts of his childhood. I don't think it was all of his childhood, but parts of his childhood, she was addicted. I know they traveled a lot because she was a part of the Black Panthers, and his father wasn't in his life. So normally when someone has a lot of holes in their story, especially within childhood, and it doesn't match what society says it should be, we tend to try to fill those holes subconsciously, based on the things that we've seen, how we've seen others connect in relationships. And Tupac's story seems to be no different with his rapping, the lyrics that he puts in his songs, and the things that we do know about him. And then I'll even give an example of my own life, just to kind of tie why I said I believe men and women, we're the same, and we just operate in parallel universes. So my childhood, I had a mother who she put her children and her husband above all things. She was definitely an overcompensator, and she coddled us. And then I had a father who was very dismissive unless he was angry. And he was very distant. And as a child, I was a very sensitive child, and a lot of the things that went on in our, and I wanted to change that, at least for me in romantic relationships. But what I ended up doing, so in my family dynamic, I watched my mom, who was, like I said, she was loving, overcompensating. She put us above herself a lot of times. And then my father, who was distant and dismissive, I kind of took on the role kind of as my mom, but not wanting the same type of man as my father. But I would be attracted to dismissive, distant men. Like, though that was the only kind of environment I knew how to operate in. When I got with men who were not dismissive and showed me that they wanted to pursue me, I didn't really know how to operate in those type of relationships. And those relationships didn't last long. When I would get with guys who were dismissive and distant, the breadcrumbing, the me feeling like I need to prove myself or be the ride or die or whatever the case may be, that's what I was familiar with, and that's what I kind of cling to. And now that I'm older and I'm starting to understand how the mind works subconsciously and consciously, I realized what I was doing. I basically was replaying the patterns that I was familiar with, and that's what I was doing subconsciously. And then on a conscious level, using my frontal lobe, I was trying to flip the situation on its head by constantly pushing and trying and doing and thinking, okay, well, eventually I'll get the reciprocity back, the love, the attention, the affection. And it never came. And I had to come to learn that I really was just performing for the validation and the approval that I wanted from my father. Replaying different scenarios from kind of in my past with dealing with a dismissive, distant father, and choosing partners who shared those same characteristics and trying to recreate those stories, all going on subconsciously. So that's what I meant when, when we have holes in our stories that doesn't fit the societal norms or what you see on TV, you try to fill them yourself the best way you can. And if you're not paying attention to the patterns that you grew up around and pay attention to your patterns and how you've grown accustomed to them and how you subconsciously implement them in your relationships and romantic life, you'll be replaying those same patterns you wanted to avoid, that your parents played out or that you've seen other people play out, because you're going off of what feels familiar. You're going off of just your subconscious alone, which is way stronger than your conscious. So we operate off of patterns. You can think of your brain just having different files for different situations and different things. So if you're presented with a situation in a relationship and you have a pattern, a file that you've normally used to deal with that situation, whether it's good or bad, if you're not intentional, you're more than likely to veer towards the file, the pattern that may be toxic. And then if you don't understand how the brain works, you'll constantly just be on a rat wheel, just trying to figure out, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I move forward? For me, it was really sitting down and realizing that, okay, I feel resentment. And I really had to do the work and just be okay with feeling resentment, because for a long time, I tried to hide that I felt any type of resentment, even from myself. And once I decided to get real clear, crystal clear and really true with myself and the situation and things that I began to learn, I learned that I was performing and I was trying to fill holes that I felt needed to be filled way back in childhood based on the dynamics of just how my family worked. So for Tupac, listening to his song lyrics, particularly in that song, and knowing a couple of things that may have not aligned in his childhood socially, I would say that he was somebody who had a savior's complex. And I would say he had also wanted to prove him as a child. He wanted to save his mom. He wanted to save his mom from the cocaine addiction. Maybe he wanted to save his mom from situations that he'd seen her in. And with him longing to do that as a child and probably not being able to, as an adult, you find yourself in these toxic situations, because if a person is healthy minded or they're on a road to healing, they don't really need to be saved by another person. They begin to understand that their happiness isn't linked to another person and they don't need to be saved by another person. So if you have a savior's complex, the only thing that's available to you for you to feel fulfilled until you figure that out is people who need to be saved. So, i.e., women who have issues and you feel like you can resolve those issues, jealousy or whatever the case may be, or be the side dude because you see this woman with a man who may not be fulfilling her needs and you feel like you can do that, and you want to come in and play savior and sweep this woman off of her feet and off of this bad situation to give you that validation that you probably have always felt you needed since a kid. And in reality, you just wanted to save your mom. For me, in reality, I just wanted love and approval and to feel safe around my dad. So I would get into those situations so I could recreate those things and be the person to bring that, to fill that void, or rely on this person to fill that void. So self-reflection. Self-reflection is going to be the number one thing that helps a person if they are somebody who is going through toxic relationships, dealing with toxic people, and they don't really understand why. Self-reflection is important. So the first thing on self-reflection is really identifying the root. So did it come from childhood? Did it come from a traumatic experience? Was it just a societal norm that you just seen and you felt like, hey, this is the way to go? Like, where's the root? And then as far as then after you understand your roots on why you do the things that you do, then you can go into what motivates you to do those things, right? Is it validation? Do you need to feel like you have to control the situation? Do you feel like you need to save people, which links to controlling the situation and controlling outcomes? Like, why do you do the things that you do if you know it's only going to lead you into toxicity? Like, really understanding your patterns and where they came from will help you evolve from being someone who ends up in relationships where they constantly feel like they saving somebody, or they constantly feel like they got to prove themselves so they don't get breadcrumbed, or, you know, they can get consistency. Like, really understanding who you are, your story, your why, your motivations, and then listen those things out. And if you want to change those things, one kind of shadow work, kind of exercise that you can do, you can think of a word, 1 to 3 words that you feel you identify with now that you want to change. For me, I'll give you 2. 1, overcompensator. The second one is bad communicator. Okay. These are things about me that back then were really bad. So, think on why, for me, thinking on why I overcompensated, who I overcompensated with. And then from there, taking that word, understanding the actions that I did up under that word, and then reverse it. What word do you aspire to be that's the complete opposite? So for me, the opposite would be reciprocity. Okay. And then list out, okay, what steps can I do to get to that word? Reciprocity for me looked like being able to say no, and the people around me being like, okay, it's okay. I had a lot of people when I first was going on my journey of not people pleasing. I would say no, or I would text no, and they would push and push and push and call and call and call. So purging those people out and being honest. So again, learning to be a good communicator on what I wanted and what I didn't, setting boundaries so I can get the reciprocity that I was looking for out of other people. And what that brought in for me was people who also had healthy boundaries, right? So I used to have guilt around, like, let's say if I tell somebody I'm guilty, because in the interim, I hated to be ignored. But then I had to remember, like, hey, you're knocking yourself off of your spot. You are the main character in your story, in your life. And if you already gave an answer and they're still calling and texting, there's no reason to feel bad. That took me a long time. I would feel so guilty and so bad. That was something else I had to deal with. Like figuring out and constantly reminding myself, I am the main character of my story. I can't keep letting users or narcissistic people trick me out my spot because that's what I used to do. And then I was a bad communicator because I was afraid to speak up. You know, I didn't want to lose people. But then I had to realize that these were people that I did not want in my life in the long haul, because once I learned about just my nervous system and how being up and down and up and down and up and down with someone all the time could really mess you up mentally and physically, I just came to terms that, okay, this isn't worth it. Like, what do I need to do? And learning how to be a better communicator and being intentional about what I wanted and what I was willing to deal with definitely has helped me in securing the type of relationships that I want. Because at the end of the day, we are all mirrors. And if anybody is treating you badly, they're only reflecting back to you what you need to work on. So that's all I have for you guys today. In his lifetime, before he tragically passed at a young age. And I feel like a lot of us confuse being a sucker for love for being chosen. And we got to identify the roots of that. Because why you got to be a sucker for anything? Why would you want to be a sucker for anything? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you can control that. So that's all I got. I'll see you guys next week.